I must start off in 1940. I was 15, and my father on that Sunday said, I want you to come to church with me today. It's going to be a long service, but you're going to see a young man who's going to get married to the church. And I predict that this young man is destined for greatness. I went, and there was Demetrius Kukuzi, who later became Archbishop Iakovos. That was in 1940. Going further now, the next time our lives' paths crossed was in 1950, when I had gotten out of college. My wife was a member of the cathedral in Boston, and Father Kukuzi was the dean of the cathedral. He had gotten to know Madam well, he knew me, and he agreed to come on that New Year's Eve of December 31st, 1950, to the engagement party that my in-laws gave at the log cabin in Waltham that they owned. So that was a time that we had getting to really get to know each other. And then, when we had picked the date, he was a person who blessed our marriage. That was in September 2nd, 1951. As it was, trying to go as a young man, going into the family business, the Archbishop was coming to Lowell, Massachusetts, the Holy Trinity, for the 75th anniversary of the church. But before he came, he called the president and said, I want you to contact Arthur and Madeline Anton and tell them I want them to host a reception for me at their home. Well, we gave a reception for over 100 people, most of them non-Greeks, because I wanted the community to meet this outstanding man. And it was, during that night, he pulled me over and said, I want you to do something for me. I said, what is it? I want you to be a member of the Archdiocesan Council. I said, well, yeah, if you want me to, I will. And the first meeting was that December 1970 in Salt Lake City, Utah. At our first meeting, the Archbishop came out, he looked troubled, he looked worried, and he said, we're having a problem. I don't have money to meet the payroll this week. He said, although we have a sustaining program which has been in existence for a couple of years, where we ask individuals to give $100 directly to the national church. At that time, there was a Vecovilladium that was in existence. The communities would send $10 per person to the archdiocese, and I remember the budget was $800,000. I felt somewhat of the pain that he was going through, and I decided to see, what can I do? I came back to Lowell, I went to my church parishioners, and started asking my friends and the parishioners to give me $100. Give me a $100 check made out to the Archdiocese, the Archdiocese of America. I was able to collect 69 checks in 1970, and I brought him to New York, and the Archbishop was amazed that here I had gone and had done this, and he said, you know, we've had this sustaining program, but I've been thinking, we got to change it. It needs new life and so forth. So he said to me, I've been thinking of the name Logos, the word, spreading the word and so forth, and we call it the League of Greek Orthodox Stewards. And we'll go ahead and have a card where a person could check off $100, $250, $500, or $1,000. And that was the amount we were looking for. Well, And he says to me, I want you to be the national chairman. I couldn't refuse him. And what happened then was that Paulette Poulos happened to be the executive director of the stewardship for the Archdiocese. And the Archbishop assigned her the task of Logos. So Paulette, George Chimples, who was not at that time the national finance chairman of the Archdiocese, had asked the Archbishop to put me on his committee from day one, from 1970. And I wouldn't refuse George, my good friend, to work with him for the church. So as a result, we would travel with His Eminence all over the country. We went to Texas, we went to Phoenix, we went to Los Angeles, we went to Cleveland, we went to Detroit, all over, talking about Logos and talking about the 3 C's of Christianity: care, concern, commitment. If you care about your church, you're going to listen to what I have to say. If you're concerned about how we're going to go ahead and grow, then you must be able to make a commitment that you will support the church, to give the Archbishop the tools that he needs to carry on his work. And that was how, and I remember that Archbishop Yakos came up with one idea, that when a person gave the first $100, they would be given a beautiful framed of the Lord in the vineyard. And at the bottom were 10 little squares. And every year that you paid your pledge, you have a little year mark that came from the Archdiocese, and you stick it on so that you could see continuity for at least 10 years. Now, even with that, from 1972 till 1982, when I said, I've been doing this for 10 years, but by the 82, we were giving the church $1 million at that particular time. So the following 2 years, we're having our meeting in Detroit, and George Chimples came to me and said, Arthur, I've got an idea. I want you to support this idea, and I want you to second the motion. I said, what is it? What is it? I've been thinking that there's not enough money come in for parishes to really do the things we need to do. I'd like to start a new organization and find 100 people who will go ahead and be willing to give $10,000 a year for 10 years for $100,000. So Leadership 100 was an offshoot of the Logos program. We went to the Archbishop before we went to the council meeting, and George presented the idea to the Archbishop. And I said, I second the motion. And he said, don't forget it. If you can find 10 Greeks in this country that will give you $100,000, God bless you. Go ahead and do it. We took it to the council that day, and there was quite a bit of friction. We had difficulty in trying to get this across because thought that this would be a rich man's club, this isn't for the church and so forth. But we finally, George made the motion, I seconded it, and it became a reality. I remember that was in December. In May of the following year, or April or May, I hosted in Boston a dinner for about 28 individuals and explained, and the Archbishop came to that particular meeting. And that night, as a result of that meeting, 16 members joined. But I neglected to tell you that first, all the 7 members of the Finance Committee pledged to be members. And as a result, George Chimples had a big event in Cleveland. He asked me to go ahead and come there. We had this meeting again, and again, 12 people came from there. We had Amico Callis, who was also a member at that time, in Phoenix, Arizona. He had a great crowd of about 50 or so, and another group of individuals became members. In New York, Peter Dion, Michael J. Harris gave a number of events, and I always would attend these events with him. And it was exciting to see how we were able to reach 100, and then people started saying, well, we got to change the name. We got to call it Leadership 200. And we said, no, this will always be Leadership 100, even if we have 500 or 1,000 people. So as the years went by, we now realize that the Archbishop had a way of being able to go ahead and get funds that he needed to grow the church. And I'm happy to say that here we are in 2015. The budget of the Archdiocese is $28 million. And so far, Leadership 100 has given $39 million to the church, and we are at 964 members, and it won't be long before we'll reach 1,000. It was a few years before Archbishop Iacos of blessed memory passed away that I was fortunate to have lunch with him and Paulette up at his home in Rye. And he said to me, Anton, how many members do we have now? And I said to him, Your Eminence, we're up to 644. He says, God bless you. I said, George Callis wants us to reach 1,000. And I think one day that will become a reality. As I reflect now, 40 years later, and realize that here is a fund that you've got a group of Greeks together, good Christian people, to go ahead and make this all possible. The church now is safe, that there'll always be this fund giving money to go ahead and help the church in whatever direction the Archbishop feels is necessary.